Gustavo about spatial metadata management tool. After that, we'll hear from Wendy Peloquin about managed services, and we'll round it out with Richard Allen and the 2023 FIG Working Week in Orlando before we get into our closing session. And it's looking like we've got a lot of people back in the room. So let's see, just admit a few more here. And I think if we're all ready, I'll start with Shannon here. So Shannon worked with her at Manatee County. She graduated from Manatee Technical College in 2000 as a mechanical draftsman. She joined Manatee County Utilities Department in the Utility Records Division in 2007 when the Geographic Information System was in its infancy, so long-term user here. Over the last 15 years, she has progressed through the career ladder and has now been in a supervisory role for the last 10 years. Shannon is quality driven with prevention of damages to the underground infrastructure as her driving force. She has taken part in the implementation of multiple integrations with a variety of work order management systems and is one of the database managers for utilities data. And as we heard in one of the previous sessions, she's also the co-founder and co-lead for Women in GIS Tampa Bay chapter. And Shannon and her family enjoy the adventure of tromping around the forested areas of Ocala in their off time. All right, so Shannon, are you ready? Oh, I see your mouth moving, but I don't hear ya. So everyone, please hold for technical difficulties. We'll figure this out. Yes, I do believe there's a dial-in number. Let's see. All right, I'm putting one of the number options in the chat here.
So it'd be one of those great times where we had some like hold music.
Yeah. Wendy, you got any more polls? Oh, you've got it coming.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
All right. Sorry, leave it to me to have the technical difficulties. The one person who was really nervous about the length of their the presentation being too short.
This
Give me
is
just a
planned.
second. Let me. Well, you know, one of my many hats is the reason why I had to change venues. I am serving as the planning section chief for the Bradenton area river regatta. So I have a 2 p.m. meeting. I had to get down here. Sorry. I tested everything at my office, but
You're just building anticipation. Good play.
yeah. Give me just a second. I'm sorry.
All right, and we can see your screen, so you're good to go.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry, guys. So welcome and thank you for joining. Today, I want to give you a brief glance into the processes and workflows that we used in our journey over the last 2.5 years, from being from our data being in a geometric network to being ready to convert into the utility data. The utility network data model. We're far from being complete, but we wanted to share our experience thus far with the community. I was introduced to Data Reviewer several years ago as a streamlined way to QC data. When it came time for this conversion, somehow I have become the subject matter expert on the Data Reviewer. It's a term I use very loosely. Since I was the only one that had actually used it in the past, that's the reason I was a subject matter expert. Let me just figure out my controls, sorry. All right, here we go. A little about the utility records division, and Ryan mentioned our structure earlier, but I'll just reiterate, not for so much locates, I did leave them out of this, but we are a team of 4 GIS technicians and analysts, 2 record technicians, and a management team of 3. We're responsible for housing utility records, mapping and analyzing over 10,000 linear miles of infrastructure, and nearly 750,000 data points across 7 utility networks. We also have data mapped inside of 3 wastewater treatment facilities and 1 potable water treatment facility that we have stored in separate secure databases with limited access. So we're starting with why. So for some time, we've all been living with this impending threat of ArcMap Desktop no longer being supported, knowing that we were going to need to change into editing in Arc Pro. We were lucky to discover this early in the process, that we're not going to be fortunate enough to continue editing our data in its current format in Arc Pro, leading us to discover that we would need to convert our data out of the geometric network data model and into the utility network data model. Over the last 15 years, our focus has been collection of the data, building our databases to best serve both our internal and external customers. We have updated domain lists, assigned fields that were once text, a domain list, changed domain lists assignments. Some domain lists are coded, others are not. And we even consolidated some domain lists in the sake of, less is more. Over the years, we have had turnover, each person having their own method of drafting. Just 1 second. I'm gonna go analog. Sorry, guys. So over the years, we've had a considerable amount of turnover, each person having their own data entry methods. We as a group have also changed the way that we enter data over time, For example, when I started with utilities, we were drafting features nearly on top of each other. And then for the sake of cartography, because we were printing maps, we started offsetting point features from one another as much as 10 foot. So each feature would be visible on a printed map. This caused a bit of issue with both of our internal customers and our external customers, because customers were assuming the location of features based on our maps. So with the advancement of online interactive maps, the decision was made to draft features as close to reality, or excuse me, as close to real world as possible, often vetting these locations with GPS. The biggest issue that happened as a result of moving these existing features multiple times is we inadvertently created cutbacks and invalid geometry. These things would not be highlighted until we use Data Reviewer. Okay. So what is Data Reviewer? It's an extension for the ARC suite of products and a tool for detecting errors in order to improve the quality of your spatial data. This is a very powerful tool that is going to find errors in your data you had no idea were there. Because at a typical mapping scale, you won't be able to see them. Cutbacks and disconnects are a perfect example of this. A cutback occurs when a linear feature cuts back on itself. The line would still function as normal during a network trace. Often, even if all of the vertices of a line are visible, you'll be unable to see that cutback. A disconnect is most often a result of an issue with snapping. Again, you can't really see those. The majority of the ones that we had were so close. You had to zoom in to like 1 to 0.025. It was very close, but you had to zoom in just to see the disconnect. So you think that a point is snapped to the end of the line, but it didn't for whatever reason. Anyone can use this tool to analyze data for errors. Like many other tools that Esri has developed, Data Reviewer is easy to use. If the Data Reviewer extension is available to you, it will be listed in your extension dialog window found in the Customize menu of ArcMap Desktop and enabled by checking the box. As many other tools, ArcMap may need to be restarted, enabled for you to get the toolbars and then get started with your Data Reviewer. I'm not as familiar with ArcPro and how these tools function in ArcPro, but I do know that they can be used in ArcPro, and one way to enable Data Reviewer is by searching the toolbox for Data Reviewer, and then data management tools come up in the toolbox. There also seems to be some other ways to control Data Reviewer using tools from the toolbox in ArcPro. One of the things was starting a session and disabling Data Reviewer, enabling Data Reviewer. There were many other things that in that toolbox in ArcPro that you can use those data management tools. So Data Reviewer uses a variety of predefined checks that range from feature integrity checks, which look for things like cutbacks and duplicate vertices, to attribution checks that verify domain values and that there are no duplicates in a unique ID field. Each of the checks are dynamic and allow you to customize the data customize to the data you want to verify. For instance, we have a unique identifier field, as I'm sure many of you have, for all of our features in our database, which are then grouped by type of feature and put into like a bucket that's called a sequence. The field is populated through an automated workflow, and if we want to verify that there's no duplicates in the ID, then I'm able to select all of the features that would fall into a specific sequence, and then Data Reviewer will look through through the specified field, through all of the feature classes, and make sure that there are no duplicates. If there are, it will give me a resulting list. There is something of high importance when, this is something of high importance when data is integrated into other systems, as that unique identifier is used for tracking and maintenance. We began our timeline by meeting with Esri in mid-August of 2020 to kick off the discussion about converting to the utility data network model. Our data was uploaded and shared with Esri the day after our meeting. Some of our data was later found to be corrupt, and we had to upload 2 of our networks again in the middle of October. We were advised at the beginning of January 2021 what the credit cost would be and to conduct the readiness assessment on 4 of our 7 networks: potable water, reclaimed water, sewer collection, and drainage. We approved the cost and the assessment process started. We had an introductory meeting with our Esri consultants assigned to perform our assessment in mid-March, and the assessment was scheduled to start during the following 2 weeks. The first week of April, we received our utility network data readiness assessment report, along with data reviewer workspace, data reviewer batch jobs, and validation results. We met with our Esri consultant in mid-March to discuss the results of the assessment and for a transfer of knowledge on maintaining and executing the batch jobs. Eat a live frog every morning, and nothing worse will happen to you the rest of the day. Mark Twain. I interpret this quote to mean, if you start with the most difficult task, then every task after that will seem like pie or cake. You know, it'll be no big deal. Our frog would be our potable water network, which is our largest data set. Our potable water mains alone cover more miles than the driving distance from our office located in Bradenton, Florida, to St. Louis, Missouri, and back, with a total of 2,131 linear miles. We have nearly 140,000 customer connections. This database is immense, to say the least. So based on that logic, it was obvious that our potable water network was where we would have to start. Returning to our timeline, in the beginning of October, we started running the batch file for potable water in a file geodatabase. We did this for multiple reasons, but mainly because we knew having a 15-year-old database that has had many alterations, many editors, and that had never been reviewed in this manner. And also, since I was the subject matter expert, I needed to freshen up on the functionality of Data Reviewer. We had over 300,000 errors that needed to be corrected on our first run. This is nearly 1 error for every point feature in our potable network. By mid-November, we were ready to move into the version environment and start making corrections. We did have a couple of hiccups concerning data reviewer tables. These tables have to live in SDE directly under whatever database that you're working in. So for me, it was our GIS util database, and those tables had to be in there, and they also had to be registered as versioned. We figured this out by putting in an Esri ticket to support, and they were able to help us. Once in the version environment, we decided that from the results in the batch file, instead of resolving errors one by one, moving through the table for data reviewer, that we were going to make mass corrections outside of a data reviewer session. Most of the corrections that were needed were domain were a result of the domain check. That they just didn't match what the current domain assignments were. So we made that decision to just do that outside of the data reviewer session. You may recall that I mentioned all the changes we have made to our domains over the years. So it's not a surprise that we had so many domain issues. The corrections could be made in a more timely manner, choosing to edit in a mass method. When we ran the batch file for Potable at the beginning of December, excluding the dangle check because for some reason it was giving us an error, we were down to 24,633 errors. Work continued resolving the errors, utilizing mass correction for any remaining domain errors. By the first week of February 2022, we have resolved that set of errors to the best of our ability. And the decision was made to run the batch file again to include the dangle check, and our results were down to 15,067. We took notice that there were many of the errors being marked as exceptions for whatever reason. And at the end of March, we reached out to our Esri consultant to clarify whether these exceptions would prevent us from migrating into the utility network. We have a large amount of disconnected features that have been added through either GPS verification, such as hydrants, valves, and meters, or through integrations with customer data, such as meters. The data is utilized across different platforms, and it cannot be removed or deleted. We were advised these features will not prevent us from going into migration, but they will cause topology errors that will have to be resolved at a later date. We also received a link for the solution for the Water Distribution Network Foundation during this interaction. We continued to make corrections, and by the end of July, we decided to run the batch file just one more time, resulting in 3,911 errors. We were trying to get the errors as close to zero before we started trying to push into conversion. So, as we move into the future, we now have routine data checks, and we'll continue to use Data Reviewer to verify the integrity of our potable water network. We still have a long road ahead of us, with at least 3 more databases in the immediate future needing to have the checks run and resulting errors corrected. I plan to share my knowledge with my team and train them in order to move more efficiently towards all of our networks being ready for conversion, because my next assignment is actually conversion. I have opened up the utility network. I've started converting data into the utility network. So I need to focus on that as others are continuing to use the data reviewer to improve the data. And that's all I have for today. So if anybody has any questions, I am open for them.
Thanks, Shannon. Yeah, so anyone put up raise a hand and I'll let you know, or just unmute and ask a question now. Feel free to type it in and I'll read it for you if you'd like. Also, Shannon, I don't know if you saw the chat, but you caused a storm of frogs on here with the Mark Twain quote. It's pretty funny.
I did not. I was trying to ignore it. Oh, that's fantastic. I love it.
Jim Grimes would like to know, who is your UN consultant?
So we are working with Srinivas, and I'm sure I murdered his name, and I'm not particularly sure what his last name is, but that was the consultant that we work with through Esri. And his capacity was just simply getting us started with the data reviewer, doing the assessment and getting us started with the data reviewer. As far as the util network conversion, that's been me. I launched the solution. I'm the one that's done the training. I'm the, you know, the solution is actually fairly easy to go through. These solutions that Esri's putting out now, especially the util network, is task-based. So it's a step-by-step. It gives you instructions. It tells you why you're doing what you're doing, why you're mapping certain things to certain places. Yeah, Ryan got it. He has a very long last name. But so far that's just been me. So I'm the guinea pig that learns and then teaches everybody else.
Now you know it 10 times better from teaching everyone about it.
Yes.
All right.
I see Brooke has her
We've
hand
got
raised.
Brooke, you've got a question.
Yeah, just wondering, you mentioned that you guys aren't done yet, et cetera. Which data sets do you still have to go through this with, for which utilities? I apologize if I didn't catch it.
No, it's fine. So we've only done the data reviewer on our potable network. We didn't want to do everything at once. We wanted to, like I said, you know, start with the frog, start with the worst one. This is our worst case scenario, get through it. And then we figured that after we got through that, everything else would just be pie. So we are doing a one by one. Well, we're thinking of doing one by one, but I think that we're actually going to shift. And the remaining 3 networks that we have had assessed, we're going to simultaneously be data reviewing those databases.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of work.
Oh yeah, it's a lot, it's loads. It's the reason, it's just one of my many hats, you know. I don't have time for anything. Yeah, it is definitely job security, Kelly.
See, next we've got Gustavo's got a question, and then Daniel, how about you after him?
Yes, I have a question for Shannon. The question is this: is this data reviewer able to detect flow lines downstream? And my question is because I have around 12,000 flow lines, and I need to check that each of those flow lines are going downstream and not upstream. Is this data reviewer able that?
So there's actually other tools that are available for that, and I think it's actually the network analyst tools. The network analyst toolbar, it is really good for that tracing. It'll trace upstream, it'll go downstream, it'll find all your disconnected points. Data reviewer, maybe not so much.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Shannon.
Mm-hmm.
All right, how about Daniel?
Good afternoon. I'm with USF. I was gonna ask, I know that you guys have like some of the line works and stuff from the outside entities that you guys don't necessarily maintain, but do you guys include those data sets into your models as well? Or do you guys just work with the models that are just Manatee County owned utilities?
So this, the tools we ran, it ran on everything. So we do map both public and private. If it's in the county, we have it. And let me just, if it's in Manatee County and we've received a record for it, then we map it. That's a big caveat if we receive the record. So it is both public and private.
No, that's really interesting. You'll probably be hearing from me at some point.
I welcome any questions. All of my contact information is here, and anybody that wants to reach out.
And we'll make these presentations available after the conference too. So everyone will have, the questions will just come flowing in, Shannon.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's not looking like we've got anyone else with some questions right now. I'll give a final extra minute in case there's a last minute question. All right. Well, thank you, Shannon. And you went right up to 140.
Thank you guys for having me. And thank you, Ashley, for letting me use your office. I gotta jump off and go to my next meeting. So thank you guys.
All right, so next we've got Gustavo Orozco. And this, just get ready for this resume. Gustavo is a certified GIS professional, a surveyor engineer, and an emergency responder with the US EPA and US Coast Guard. He has 2 master's degrees, the first in natural resources and environmental management, and the second in environmental and urban geosciences. And if that's not enough, he possesses an advanced certificate in geographic information systems. Also with the US EPA, he's been nominated to the Mason Hewitt Award for Excellence in GIS. And he's also a SAG Award winner, the real SAG Award, which is the prestigious Special Achievement in GIS Award given by Esri. So that's really impressive. He works as a GIS analyst and Python and web mapping applications developer for Tetra Tech. And he's been working locally and internationally in GIS analysis and development, supporting emergency response, oil, hydrology, and environmental fields for more than 23 years. All right, welcome, Gustavo.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction. Really appreciate it, and thank you for being here. Today, I'm going to talk about a spatial metadata management tool. As all we know, in the late years, this is more and more important for organizations, especially federal organizations that have huge amount of data to manage. So this is one specific tool that is going to help to manage the metadata and all that. So without further ado, let's start. I'm going to share my screen and just let me know. Yeah, this one. Sure. Just let me know whenever you can see my screen, guys.
Yep, looks good.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay,
Sorry.
perfect. Okay, perfect. Okay, so spatial metadata management tool. So this is the agenda for today. I'm going to give a brief introduction of metadata, the justification for the tool development, the tool demo, and a QA session. So what is metadata? So in simple terms, is information that describes an item. It allows users to understand the data source, the processes, the accuracy, and the purpose of the data. What questions can users resolve with metadata? Metadata records document who created the data, what is the purpose of the data, when the data was created, and what is the temporal spatial range of the data, where is the data located at, how, so the processes, how were the process to achieve the purpose of the data, and why the data was created. So that's kind of all the questions that metadata can resolve. Why is metadata important for organization? Well, as I said, metadata is important because it can support, especially federal organizations and the state organizations, data distribution. Of course, let's say that you receive a data, but you don't know what is the source, what is the precision, what is the accuracy, what is the process. So probably it's not very reliable. So that's one of the things that is important for metadata. Data distribution, data management, and project management. And finally, what are the main metadata standards? So although there are thousands of standards out there in the spatial industry, these are the most important. The ISO 19115, the Federal Geographic Data Committee Content Standard for Digital Geospatial Metadata, the ISO 19139, and the Inspire Metadata Directive. So that's the introduction of the metadata. Now, this is the justification of the tool, why I created this tool. So I have been working with the STAR contract for more than 13 years, sorry. It's a engineering and technological contract that we have with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. So we manage several geodatabases and third-party data. So under one specific contract that we have with the US EPA, we receive around 200 US EPA and third-party geodatabases. So it's a lot. And the challenge was to verify the metadata compliance of each of the feature classes, tables, and rasters contained in these geodatabases, which is around 5,000 elements among feature classes, tables, and rasters. So it was a big amount. Let me show you what is the metadata standard that they have. So this is the technical EPA metadata technical specification. And this is the standard that they are managing under ISO 19115 standard of 2003. And we have here all the data required always, all this information needs to be in compliance. So of course, it was a big job that if you do this manually, just check for compliance of 5,000 is going to take you around 1 or 1.5 months of your job working 8 hours per day. So that was a big undertake, a big taken. So that's kind of the justification. So we sit down with the EPA directives in Region 9. We started to think about what to do because it was a lot of jobs. So I wanted to create a management tool for this, something that was easy to understand and easy to run. So within the US EPA or public industry, there were no tools to manage metadata compliance in bulk or in a batch with the US EPA standards. So it was not a tool that allowed you to see if certain feature classes or certain rasters are or tables are in compliance with this specification, with this standard. So finally, US EPA wanted to have a mandatory compliance report for all these elements. So it was a big job. So I started to develop a tool, and this tool is a mix between a model builder and Python geoprocessing toolbox. So the first step was, as you can see here in this graphic, this is the tool that I create, Metadata Compliance Toolbox version 1. And it has basically 2 components. One that is a model builder that is divided in A, B, and C. Each of them, 1A is for feature classes, 1B is for tables, and 1C is for rasters. And the second step is just to run the compliance checker that is basically an encapsulated Python code in a geoprocessing tool. So the first step creates clean metadata XML files. All these 3, they create clean native metadata format files, which are XMLs. And the second step analyzes each of the XMLs that the first step created for metadata compliance using the US EPA metadata specification NAP ISO 19115-2003 standard, which is the official standard for EPA. So the second step also creates an easy to understand CSV report with compliance or instructions of no compliance elements within the metadata for each feature class, table, or raster. So this second one analyzes everything in comparison with the standard and says, okay, this element of the metadata is in compliance or not. If it's not in compliance, it's going to put that information in the report, specifying the exact route of the error. So that's kind of the idea of this. Okay, so this is the example of the model builders. As you can see, it's very simple. It just iterate feature classes, in this case, raster in this case, or tables. And after it iterates of inside a file geodatabase or personal geodatabase or a SD geodatabase, enterprise geodatabase, it goes and create a clean version of or export a clean version of XML. And that's kind of the idea of these. These are independent. The second part is the Python geoprocessing tool. It's encapsulated again in a geoprocessing tool like this. So you just need to put the path of the folder where you created the XML and the CSV name, where you want to put your CSV, and that's very simple. It's very simple. Here is the code behind it. These are all the importing modules. This is the creation of the function to add the information to the CSV file. And here you start defining the variables and create the CSV file. That's the simple way to say that. That's the idea. Here we have another part of the code. So in here, you can start looking for tags in your XML. Basically, whenever you work in a metadata, you are looking for tags. That's all that you do. Look for tag. For example, in this case, in order to find the type of the entity, you go to this tag here. This is a tag. And this is a view of the XML inside XML. So you can see, sorry about it. You can see that we are looking for this tag. So you are going to EA info, detail, entity type, and entity type PT, which is this one here. So that's kind of the idea of the code. The code uses tags in order to look for specific requirements in that specific tag. And this is an example of the CSV metadata compliance report. It's very simple. So basically, everything that has FC here at the beginning is a feature class. Everything that has R at the beginning is a raster. So you know what kind of element are you looking at. You have the number of the feature classes or raster or tables. And you have here the compliance is just one column says, hey, true is, that means everything is in compliance with the standard. And this means that something is going on with the standard right now. So as I said, this is going to give you the exact route that you want to look at and the exact element in the metadata that is wrong, either because there is a wrong standard or there is no tag, or there is an error in that element. Okay. Now we are going to the tool demo. So I'm going to start my R catalog. The other thing is that this management tool works with R catalog, the normal one, or with the RGS inside RGS Pro. Okay. So we are right now in the metadata validator. So the idea is that we are going to go to the tool and start working with that. So the first thing that you do is run the 1A, 1B, and 1C. But I know I have an example geodatabase. I know that I don't have raster. I just have a feature classes inside data set and tables. That's all that I have. So I'm going to run just 1A and 1B. So I edited. For the purpose of this summit, I just have this ready, pointed to the right geodatabase, and pointed to the right place where I want to store the XML. I'm just going to validate and run it. And by the way, it's pretty quick. You can see it generated the XMLs already. Just save it. Here, go to the 1B because I know that I have tables that I need to process as well. Again, I already pointed to the right geodatabase. So I'm just going to validate and run it. Okay, completed. So now if we go to the to that particular place where I have these examples. You can see that it just generated this right now, generated the XML for the feature classes and the table. Okay. Now, once you have the XMLs, you can go to run the XML, the second step of the checker. So you go to the path where you have the XML, which is here. And you go to see what is the where you put the CSV file. So I want to put the CSV file here. And I'm going to say that it's going to be GeoFlo.csv. Okay. I run it pretty quick. Okay, completed. So now if I'm going to CSV, it just generated this. And it's telling me that there are, yep. So it goes through each of the feature classes and it's telling me, hey, what is okay, what is not okay. For example, this one says false in is extent. It's telling you a specific what part of the extent is not working. So I'm going here. And it says that this is the one that is having trouble. So I'm going to the description. I know exactly where do I need to go to in order to fix it. Even though everything says that is okay, is check marks in everything is not okay. So that's why this checker is so important, especially for large amount of feature classes that you need to comply in metadata. So for example, in this case is resource. So resource extends. Now if I'm going to extend, I'm going to extend temporal, no, not temporal, but bounding box. It says that east is wrong. Bounding box east. So I say, okay, why is wrong? Oh, because they forgot it's in minus here. So the parameter is that it cannot be less than certain point in order to make it true. I mean, compliant. So now it's okay. I save it. I'm just going to verify that I save it. Save it. Yes, it's okay. So now the only thing that I need to do is replace that XML. So in that case, that I'm going to use is the clean export tool. Sorry, clean export tool. So I'm going to the source metadata. The source metadata is this one here. And the output metadata is going to be this. I'm going to delete this and I'm going to create this again. Okay, I created. I'm going to here and I'm going to see if, yep, 159. So I create this again. So now the only thing that I need to do is rerun the second tool here. Where am I? Oh, rerun this one. The XMLs again, they are here. And the CSV file name, I want to put this here. As text. And in this case, I'm going to say GeoFlo2.csv. So we are going to see the difference. Okay, done. Completed. Now I'm going here. Flow2. And now we can see that is in compliance. Whereas in the first version, this was not in compliance because of that. So that's the idea. That the idea of the tool is pretty important because instead of spending 1.5 months looking for compliance for every single feature class, you run it and you know exactly if it's in compliance or not. And if it's not in compliance, you just go and fix the issue and rerun the tool. So let's continue here. So we were here. Okay. Demo. Okay, that concludes the tool demo. And now questions and answers. That's all that I have for you guys.
That was awesome. I could use that at my job right now. All right, so any questions? Again, just raise a hand, or if you want me to ask the question, feel free to type it in the chat. Steve says, great automation.
I have a question. This is Brooke.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So as somebody who doesn't necessarily deliver their data and therefore doesn't do metadata on a regular basis, you know, I'm sure a lot of us, especially in the consulting world, have faced, you know, we don't really know where the data came from, or we don't have, you know, good sources that came from our CAD people or some variation of that theme. What do you find is the reason that most people don't do metadata? Is it because they don't have all of the information, laziness? What do you think?
I think so. It's all of that. The first reason is because sometimes they don't know where is the information coming from, and they just, if the information looks good, it's okay for them. Sometimes, yes, it's laziness, but the majority of the time is because sometimes it's not required. It's not a mandatory requirement for the organization. So we found out that the hard way, because when we started with a contract with EPA, specifically this one of those contracts, we got so much information, around 200 geodatabase, that we needed to put everything in standards required by the US EPA. Not just spatial standards, but metadata standards. And of course, this is a huge teamwork, because you need to know where is the information coming from and start calling the originators of the data, the source of the data, no? And yes, it's absolutely a teamwork, but it's laziness, is because people don't care about metadata, if it's not required or mandatory, and all that. So sometimes it's hard to distribute the data, because when you are going to distribute the data with some federal organizations, they ask you, the first thing that they ask you is, what is the metadata of this data? So we started to generate tools like these that are going to be very cost savings, very reliable in order to comply with metadata standards. Is that answering your question?
It does. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Any other questions here? I guess since I'm in control, I can just ask my own. Is this tool more applicable to locally stored databases, or could it be applied when we're hosting it online and everything?
Well, when you are hosting online, of course, you have a source that is not online. Before you publish the information online, you have the data that you publish. So you can apply that to any published data, enterprise geodatabases, personal geodatabases, file geodatabases too. So yes, it's flexible in that regard. Yeah.
All right, any more questions here? Not seeing any now, so thank you, Gustavo.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. And the live demo with no issue. That was very impressive too. All right, so next we've got Wendy Peloquin. All right, so Wendy is a GIS professional and is currently a business development manager at Avineon with over 15 years of industry experience. She's another one who has gone through quite a bit of education. She earned a BS in geography and a certificate in GIS from University of Georgia, and went on to earn a master's degree in GIS administration from the University of West Florida. Wendy is an active member of ERISA International and is currently serving as co-chair and instructor for ERISA's GIS Leadership Academy. So thanks for coming today, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. Can everybody see the presentation portion on the screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Excellent. All right. Well, good afternoon. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about a term that I'm sure a lot of you have heard, especially over the last few years, managed services, and how organizations can take advantage of the service offering and really what it looks like moving forward into the future. So after a brief introduction, today's topics will include challenges facing organizations and really what has developed the need for the type of assistance such as managed services. I'll also talk about what they are, why they can be beneficial, and then wrap up with a few things to consider for your organization if it's something that you are considering working with a vendor for managed services. So real quick, for those of you that have not heard of Avineon, we are a privately held IT and GIS company. We've been providing services for over 30 years, and we're an Esri and Safe Software partner. We do have offices. We're headquartered in Virginia, but we do have an office down in the Tampa Bay area in St. Pete, as well as globally all over the world. So jumping right into things, there are many challenges that are facing organizations today. Some of these challenges are new, but I think a lot of you will agree that a lot of these challenges have existed for a really long time. For today, I really wanted to break down 3 of the most common challenges that I encounter when I talk with organizations and my peers, and when I used to, work in local government. And that's really looking at it from the technical perspective, the human perspective, as well as financial perspective. So jumping into the technical perspective, as you all know, the technology is rapidly changing. With every release that Esri has, there's something new. It requires completely different administration and maintenance at times. And a lot of times, as well as your GIS is growing and it's becoming more mature and enriched with more data, now everyone wants to integrate with other systems. And those integrations are becoming a lot more complicated at times. Moving forward with feature services, it is helping a little bit, but there's always something that's going on, changing and evolving with the technology. And then of course, at times there's also just difficult projects that come up. Not everybody is working on the same project, the same thing every single day. Different projects arise, such as migrating to the utility network. That's causing a whole change in the way that organizations not only edit and maintain their data, but also the infrastructure that is behind it. So overall, just, from the technical side, it's rapidly changing. It's becoming more complicated in a lot of ways. And just, there's always something else that's being thrown at all of us, to do in addition to the day-to-day that we're already maintaining and updating and organizing and supervising. And that really leads into the human aspect of challenges. A lot of organizations face limited resources, not being able to hire somebody full-time when there's turnover, or just as your organization is growing and you have more data to update and maintain, just needing more people to be able to keep up with the demand on your GIS organization. And sometimes, even with the resources that you have, being able to hire somebody, you're very limited in the knowledge that people possess. When you hire one person, you're limited to everything that they know. Not saying that they're not going to continue to learn and evolve and be able to meet some of these needs. But sometimes, if they're not very familiar with a certain thing, that can be a challenge for the organization. And then again, as I mentioned on the technical side, those periodic difficult projects that come up. Sometimes it's something that's very short term where you may only need help for 6 months or 9 months or a year and a half. And is that something that requires hiring somebody full-time, or those difficult projects? Is it even full-time work and support that your team will need to dedicate in order to continue to, service the organization and move those projects forward? And then the last piece, which I'm sure all of you can relate to there, is, the financial constraints. There are a lot of limited budgets for organizations. So being able to continue to either add staff or resources or even the infrastructure to support what you have. There are a lot of grants that have come out recently, especially supporting infrastructure that can help. But getting that money and getting things funded in the budget continuously year over year can sometimes be a challenge to get those permanent staff. The other thing is, emergencies come up. You need to go in and something goes down, you could spend money, but part of it is really just something happens within your organization, your GIS data needing to be able to jump in and respond immediately and deal with those situations. And the other piece, and I think this is the common thing, is just those difficult projects that can come up. Anytime those come up, there's always going to be a technical, a human, or a financial aspect to how it can impact an organization. So, really going into that, what are managed service providers? So according to Gartner, one of the leading technological research and consulting firms here in the US, managed services are services provided by a managed service provider. As simple as that is. This is very traditionally applied to infrastructure or device-centric types of services. But over the past, several years, it's really expanded to include any continuous, regular management or maintenance and support type services. So not just on managing the infrastructure, but anything to support an organization and what you're doing. And there's all different types of managed services. As I mentioned, kind of from a historical perspective, a lot of people think of it of managing the architecture, the software, the hardware, that infrastructure. It can also be managing the security for your organization or web hosting a website that you have, or even data. Some organizations just completely host their data somewhere else. This can also include application development. And then, really where a lot of it is moving into are these general IT and GIS services. So data editing, collection, maintenance, map creation, web app, mobile support. So more of what you think of in, the traditional vendor services with organizations that you may work with. And, why managed services? Really, the biggest thing is to extend the capabilities of your team with access to subject matter experts. This allows you to be able to reach out to the broader team within an organization that may have an enterprise expert, a database SQL expert, a ArcGIS online expert, mobile expert. So being able to get the resource when you need it for those very specific things. Because a lot of times, when an emergency comes up and you need support, there might be multiple people that you may need information from. The other thing is that institutional knowledge and documentation for that business continuity. There are lots of movement that's been going on the past couple of years with people either retiring or moving from organization to organization for different job opportunities. So managed services allows that continuity of having everything documented, a group very familiar with your infrastructure, with your anything with your ArcGIS, to be able to really withstand the storm. So it's not, the bus situation. It's not all reliant on one single person. And it can also help a lot with change management that, maybe you are working with somebody for managed services, but you do have staff that are on full time. And so as you move staff, they can help bridge that gap and help onboard new team members so that, as you're going through change, there's not a big problem. And even to the change management, going back to the infrastructure, as Esri is continuing to change and evolve and deploying, we know the huge change that's coming up in the next couple of years is going to be that move to ArcGIS Pro, and that can, mean some drastic changes on the back end. And it also, working with a team for managed services allows you to focus on more strategic projects and programs. Do you really want to spend your time administering your portal or your database, some of that little tedious work that, it's extremely important and it needs to be done, but it's a lot of little things here and there. And, being able to work with the organization and, in a managed service perspective and having somebody else manage that for you allows you to take all that time and focus on bigger things and be more strategic for your organization. The other piece is really just that cost control for budgeting. As we talked about, it can extend the capabilities. Now you're having access to a whole lot of different people with different skill sets and capabilities where, a lot of times the managed service is a lot more affordable than hiring somebody full-time. And then when you hire that person full-time, you are limited to the expertise that they have. And, one big thing I do like to talk about is a core example here from Michael Trachtenberg's article of what is a managed service anyway in Forbes magazine a couple of years ago. And this really breaks down what a customer versus provider understanding of managed services can be. And this is really just for, 10 pieces of networking gear. As you can see, the customer's expectations are not easily aligned with what the service provider is actually offering. So with that, there's several things to consider for managed services. One thing you really want to make sure is that there is a clearly defined scope of what is being managed. Is it infrastructure? Is it your data? Is it ArcGIS Online? And who's going to manage that? Because there's sometimes, depending on managed services, there may be aspects that while the vendor who's providing the managed services, they may be managing your infrastructure, so your servers and your hardware, but are actually not managing your ArcGIS. So any upgrades or updates to that, you may have to do, or vice versa. Or some managed services, they do it all. So really make sure you understand what's being offered. And then the next thing is the contract period. If it's something that, runs for a year, or is it aligned with your budget year? Do you really want it on October 1, or do you want it October 15th if you know that your organization, as soon as you approve that budget, it may work 2 weeks to get a PO? And will the vendor give you a grace period knowing it's approved, or is it going to be a hard cutoff date? The other thing is a service level agreement. Are they providing 24-hour support? Is it only during business hours? If there's an issue that's reported, do they respond within 2 hours or 4 hours, or is that different depending on the level of urgency? One thing I will tell you is 24-hour support. A lot of organizations don't actually need it. It depends on what you're working on, what you're managing. And of course, if there is going to be 24-hour support, it is something that is going to be a lot more costly. The other thing is onshore or offshore resources. If your organization has a security policy, that's really something to think about, because a lot of times with 24-hour support, some companies do bring in offshore resources and some have them all here based in the US. And then the last piece is really communication. What do the communication channels look like between you and the vendor that are providing the services? How do you report an issue? Is there a ticketing system? Is it an email? Is it a phone call? How are they reporting information back to you? What's been resolved, how it was resolved, and if there's anything that comes through questions, and really who's allowed to communicate with each team. Depending on the agreement, it could be something that's a fixed price that you'll get unlimited support for a price, or it could be something that's on a time and materials basis and you're paying hourly. So if you have multiple people making requests of the vendor, there could be a lot of requests that are, perhaps issues that you could have resolved internally and then not paying the vendor those couple of hours to do. So really just if this is something you're considering, make sure to take a look at these things among any others. And I know we're kind of running on time here, so jump in if there's any questions.
So thank you, Wendy. And yeah, just like the other ones, let me know in the chat if you have a question, or feel free to raise your hand. We've got a few West Florida fans in the chat here. Let's see. Any questions? No questions.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And if any questions come up anytime, just please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks again. All right, and right on time here. So to round us out is going to be Richard Allen. All right. And just reading his bio, Richard is a master of all things survey. He's a Florida licensed professional surveyor and mapper, and is a certified floodplain manager. He's currently the city surveyor for the city of Orlando, and he is the surveyors and government liaison for the Florida Surveying and Mapping Society. And along with that, he is a professor at Valencia College teaching, you guessed it, surveying classes. All right, well, welcome, Richard, and thank you for coming.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Excellent presentations thus far. Hopefully this one will keep everyone awake till the end. But good to meet everyone and glad to be here. What I'm going to be talking about is the FIG working week. And my apologies to start off with, this is going to be death by PowerPoint. There's just so much information to cover what this is, and this is actually a merging of a couple presentations between myself and the conference director, John Hohall. So the FIG working week is going to be in Orlando in May. It's actually going to start, the first day is on Memorial Day. So a lot of people may not attend. This is a once in a generation opportunity. This will be, I'll go through it some in the slides, but this will be the first time we're going to have an international conference like this in our region ever. It's only the third time in the United States and the first time outside of Washington, D.C., and only the fourth time in the Western Hemisphere. So a lot of the local surveying societies and different associations are going to be participating on it. It's being partnered with the National Society of Professional Surveyors. So what is FIG? Is the International Federation of Surveyors is what they'll say, but it covers just about every kind of geospatial profession, from, you know, GIS, surveying, right-of-way. It just covers so many different areas. And it's made up of a number of groups from FIG Foundation, which is now here locally with, you'll see groups like Young Surveyors or Young GIS Professionals. So you'll see that they were actually at the forefront of bringing young professionals and really developing those groups. These slides have been shared, so any of this stuff you can go through more, but it goes through the different commissions of which they operate, whether it's the professional standards of practice, professional education. You'll see they do a lot of stuff developing people in geospatial careers, and they do it in underprivileged countries. They do it everywhere. So, and a lot of these commissions where you'll see hydrographic, LIDAR and everything, they work out and put out practices that industry follows through the world. So one thing they are not FIG. Up until just a couple of years ago, I had no idea what FIG was. I knew I'd seen it, but had no immersion in it, because it's a lot more participated in internationally than it is in some of the you know, domestic here. They go by FIG. So, you know, what is the working week going to consist of? You know, it's going to be from May 28th to June 1st. And it's going to be hundreds of presentations, which they call them. They'll see down below, it says call for papers. They have people present papers and then they do a presentation on it. We're supposed to be doing one on the city's GIS network for our stormwater inventory, which is one of the city spent $12.5 million investing in the stormwater inventory, which currently consists of, I think it's 67,000 GPS, GNSS collected points for the stormwater inventory system. So we're supposed to go over that, but there's gonna be technical tours. We're supposed to be doing a technical tour with NOAA, with the hurricane hunters in Lakeland. There's supposed to be a technical tour for the cities. We have a wetlands, wastewater retreatment facility that treats effluent coming from one of our large regional wastewater treatment facilities, and then eventually outfalls to the St. Johns River. So that's going to be a technical tour. We're doing a technical tour of Southeastern Surveying, which is one of the largest surveying companies in Central Florida and in Florida. There's supposed to be a technical tour of NASA. My apologies, I forgot to mute my phone. So it's supposed to be over 2,000 people, spatial professionals attending from all over the world. Hopefully there'll be a lot of people here interested. So we're trying to make sure that there's a good presence from Central, South Florida, and North Florida, because we have an opportunity that a lot of people never get, going to an event like this that's in our own back door. So like I said, it's been a long time since there has been an FIG Congress or working week in the United States. And this is the first time in 21 years. The last one was in 2002. And I've spoken to a number of surveyors in our area that actually went to that as students, and now they're in their twilights of their career. So the International Federation of Surveyors, it's the only global association representing all geospatial professions. Like I said, GIS, right-of-way, appraisers, it just covers everything. And that's why they like to go and state that they're first in geospatial. So the associations of the Western Hemisphere that are supporting us are the American Association for Geodetic Surveying, Association of Pan-American Surveying and Topographic Professionals, the Canadian Institute of Geomatics, the National Society of Professional Surveyors, and the Professional Surveyors of Canada. And as you look, these are different agencies that we're all familiar with that are going to be participating. NOAA is actually going to have several major speeches and presentations down there, and they're trying to tie in the datum changes that are going to occur, the 2022 datum change that's supposed to take place in 2024. They want to highlight it as being a centerpiece of this conference. So for those that are vaguely familiar or not familiar at all, it's going to be a good opportunity for you to speak to the people that are actually working on these datum changes. But you'll see, ERISA and everyone else, as these groups you're familiar with, they will be participating on this, same as ASPRS. So local, I know us with the city, I've been participating in the planning of this conference. So as Orange County surveying and engineering professionals. So it's tying a lot of government entities and services. So, and then Yusuf, who presented earlier, he's been coordinating to bring in geomatic students and get UF involved. So is Bond DeWitt. They're trying to get all the schools, high schools, and trying to use it as not just a recruitment effort, but to try to get people more involved in the geospatial professions, not just surveying, but GIS and other geospatial type professions. So it's endorsed by key geospatial associations, as I stated, the Appraisal Institute, ASPRS, International Association of Assessing Officers, the Right-of-Way Association, and ERISA. So it is going to be at the Waldorf Astoria. Let me go through this. So this is just specifics of the hotel. It's right outside of Walt Disney World. It's at the Hilton Bonnet Creek Resort. I'll actually be meeting with, there's a delegation, the current president of FIG is from England, she will be here. And then also from Denmark is the executive director. So we're meeting with some of their leadership tomorrow on coordination. So they're actually going to have a drone course. If you can see the little, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's a putting green out here, and that's actually going to be a drone launching station and course. But a lot of times being domestic, we don't get immersed, I should say, with a lot of the international type drones. I mean, everyone's familiar with DJI and Wingtra and things like that, but there are a lot more vendors out there that we never, get to experience. And being this is an international conference, you'll get a lot more different equipment, from drones to LiDAR scanners to GNSS equipment. So again, same little area looking at. The registration's open now. If you're interested in attending, the deadline for the authors has passed for the papers for peer review, but non-peer reviewed. If you're like, hey, I want to submit to this, there's still a call for papers up until February for non-peer reviewed. The early bird registration closes in February of 2023. If you go to fig.net, you can go and see, it'll show you about conferences, and then you can just see the Orlando working week. And then, like I said, the rest of the dates on there. So, let me go back. The NGS director, Juliana Blackwell, will be there. And as I stated, she'll be talking about the datum change. Generally, when NGS has their, I'm trying to think of what it's called. It's like a datum summit. It's usually either done in Washington, D.C. or it's done in Denver. They're actually going to do it at this conference. So it's a unique thing that a lot of people try to travel just to that. So another opportunity. These will be the next conferences. Next year, it'll be in Ghana and Australia in 2025. And then the next worldwide conference, which is every 3 years, will be in Cape Town, South Africa. Actually, Orlando was trying for the Congress back in 2022 to coincide with the datum, but we got hit by COVID. So that went out and we lost to Cape Town, South Africa. And so now they were scheduled back in. It was in Warsaw, Poland this past year. So, and then the next two will be, the next one will be selected at this conference. So let's see, we're looking forward to seeing you there. Are there any questions? I ran through that pretty quick.
Thank you. That
You're welcome.
That definitely got me pumped up. That it really is a huge deal that it's so close, especially seeing the next few locations.
Yeah, I wanted to go to Warsaw this past time, but they were a little reluctant because of the war in Ukraine, because it's right next door.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, anyone have any questions? All right, Ryan.
See, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So just this is a pretty big deal. Then, are they going to be addressing any of the need or desire for photogrammetry approved surveyors in the state? I know that currently it's a pretty substantial working background you have to be able to certify photogrammetric surveys. I think it's 4 years survey endorsement and then a 6-year additional course. I don't know if that's something that's being discussed.
There may be a discussion on it, that I don't know. I know ASPRS is heavily involved, and I'll tell you, that's a good group to get involved with and get the discussion going, because essentially they hold the certification process. In Florida, I think, goes at their direction. I'm not a photogrammetrist, so don't let me misspeak, but I work with a number of them in industry, and they're up for discussion with certain things. That's like engineering. You hear where engineers are going back and forth, where there are some engineers that think you need to have a master's degree to have a PE. So there's some people that want it more stringent. Some people don't want it stringent at all. So, and they say we're supposed to be professionals and, can direct ourselves, but I can tell you otherwise from people I've seen. If we removed our education requirement, that, for some things it'd be the wild, wild west.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great. Anyone else? Remember in the chat or in the raise your hand. Did not see. Oh, here we go. Al Hill asks, how are you handling high school student registration costs?
That's a very interesting thing, Alan. Hope you're doing good up there in Volusia County. I know they're trying to bring a lot of students in and for free. Definitely, if you have any that are interested, email me. I know local, they're trying to work with schools within the area. I don't know how far they're going to extend in the region, but if you know someone with Volusia County or whatever jurisdiction you're trying to work within, let me know and I can pass their information. Like I said, I'm meeting with them tomorrow. This has been our first coordination meeting since I think we last had one in August. So if I find anything new, I'll let you know. But yeah, if you know of anyone that's an educator, I know they're really trying to tie in high schools, middle schools, and local colleges. I've put, like I said, USEF's involved. So yeah, let me know.
And I'll give it one more minute if anyone has the last minute hand raise or comment in the chat. But if not, I'll say thank you, Rich.
Bid you adieu. Thank you. You have a wonderful day.
And you too. All right, I guess I'll hand over my control to Steve then.
Okay, thank you, Kelsey, and thank you